there's been some interesting discussion around South Carolina freshman Gigi Jackson, and his prospect status. Like, you have people who say he's 17 and he does these cool flashes, and therefore I think he should go top 5. And then there are people who are like, he sucks. And neither of those to me are true. And as you know, with many things, the truth I think falls in the middle. And I'm gonna break down some clips from Gigi because I think he's a really interesting topic when it comes to development, and role, and just general like upside projection. He's in a really interesting role as like a 17-year-old, 6'10", toolsy dude who is thrust into a primary creator role for a pretty bad high major team. And a lot of Gigi's highlights look like this, where it's just really impressive flashes of shot making, which I think have led some to christen him as like a potential creator prospect, when I think that is very much not the case. Where the vast majority of Gigi's creation ops look kind of like this, where he's not able to gain an advantage because of his lack of burst. I do think his handle is pretty solid. Like, for a guy this young, his handling control stands out to me. I don't think he's very advanced at actually using his handle to create advantages, which is where a lot of the issues come. But he can control the ball. But a lot of this is like stumbling over and not really finding advantages, or having these kind of, windows where he either can shoot a wide open 3 here or try to create, but ends up losing the ball there. And we'll get the ball back later on this possession because he is such a focal point of this offense, and ends up just making a bad decision. And I believe he ends up turning the ball over, just randomly kind of falling into 2 defenders with a couple open teammates on the perimeter. I think he's a very, very raw creator, and to his credit, he is being asked to do a lot, and probably more than I'd have him doing at this point. A lot of his best creation, I think this is his best rep of the year, but even this one has a lot of flaws, as he sets up this move pretty well with like the between the legs, but it's pretty slow. The driving angle he takes is very looped rather than straight, and he ends up, getting himself into a really tough position, which he finishes a great offhand layup. But, ideally when you, get an advantage with a handle like this, you want to go straight at the rim, especially with his size. But because Gigi doesn't really have great burst, he can get pretty low. This is solid, but he pretty quickly gives up this leverage advantage by going upright again, and is able to, get a tough shot that he's finishing. Because of the lack of real creation tools, his burst, any real driving like feel at this point, the feel is just like a big indicator overall that I think is not great for his creation upside, along with the lack of actual advantage creation, being able to generate his own good shots and then conversely good shots for teammates. I definitely don't want to say that he's going to be a bust, because he probably, that's not fair to him. 28 usage for a 17-year-old 6'9" freshman is crazy. He's been okay. I think the threes are interesting, which we'll get back to. But the assist to turnover ratio, I want to point out, this has been kind of like a quote unquote bust indicator. As if we look at the freshman with less than half an assist to turnover ratio, it is a lot of busts. Beasley, who I've done a video on, Derek Williams, who I've done a video on, Hashim, the Beats, and then you have guys like Anthony Bennett, and a lot of the guys who end up making this work are true bigs. Boogie, obviously, Drummond, Jakob Poeltl, Miles Turner, Bam Adebayo, guys, like John Collins, guys who are centers. And I think that kind of segues nicely into the stuff that I really think is intriguing about Gigi, which are his big man kind of flashes, where to me, Gigi's real appeal is as a big who has potentially some perimeter utility rather than the other way around. Because he is really solid using the handle he can get to back himself into advantageous post position, and then using his footwork and his length to finish around defenders. He's pretty solid getting into these like post-ups, and even when he's not able to finish the initial ones, he's really great following his own rebound, and his motor on the offensive glass is really high. He gets these tip shots very regularly when his teammates are missing around the rim. And I do think that's probably my favorite avenue of his to being really valuable. And then it becomes, where do we add the creation? There's good and bad stuff on a lot of these plays. The straight line fluidity is really impressive. Having a 6'9", 6'10", 17-year-old who can draw a closeout and beat a guy off of the dribble initially is great. But what happens after, of course? Gigi has a man wide open in the corner after this help one pass away. He has a man over here after this help sinks down, and he ends up just kind of drawing a charge. Not drawing a charge, but running into him and settling for a floater. This is we talk about the lack of feel as a creator, missing these open passes, the lack of real craft. There's no jump stop, no spin move, no attempt at really creating separation aside from just going up with his size, which at this level, honestly, like is going to work probably like quite a bit, which has the potential to create some bad habits, I think, but not overly concerning. Because there are some impressive like mid-range creation moments. You can probably argue that you can argue that this pass is one that he should make, but it's pretty difficult with this defender zoning down. So I don't hate him not making that pass. And he can create some space with these little like step backs. He's pretty good and comfortable operating within this like short intermediate. And as I mentioned, like him kind of adding like a Bam Adebayo scoring toolkit, like being able to hit these like 10-foot push shots and little elbow jumpers, to me is his most intriguing pathway to real offensive value. But like most of the stuff he does looks like this at this point, and I don't fault Gigi for a lot of these plays. Like this is clearly the role he's been thrust into, and it seems like they're asking him to be the guy who takes and creates shots, even if it's not currently very pretty. Which I do think is important to mention because these guys often are thrust into these difficult roles as freshman creators, and I think it's normal that we see these kind of struggles. The passing feel is definitely a concern, and as I mentioned, is something that can only really improve so much. I think like you see it early with these real young stars who have just a general awareness of how to make the right passes, how to put themselves in the right position on drives, how to give themselves advantages, where Gigi is really just generally slow processing the floor, especially when you throw a double at him. He tends to kind of fall apart because he just doesn't have the ability to process the floor and make a play yet, especially when he's kind of working into help. There needs to be progress, but there are some good moments as well. Like you see here, this pass should probably be out like 3 seconds earlier, and in the NBA, this is probably not going to be open. But good on him to eventually recognize and make this pass. But again, we see when we're evaluating passing, or at least when I evaluate passing, it's important to look at the passing windows. This is a massive passing window. And while Gigi eventually makes that pass, it's important to think, is an NBA defender going to allow this to happen? Is he going to get this same massive space in the NBA to make that kind of pass? And the answer is usually no, but it's solid to see him making this anyway. I like this rep as well. Seeing this guy off the catch, this is probably not the pass choice I'd use. I'd probably throw it higher, but it's good that, again, I think the simple closeout attacks are going to be what's real for Gigi, because again, he is able to attack off the catch because he is a credible shooter, and then hopefully be able to use that off the catch gravity to find his man as well. I talked about the shooting earlier, which I think is pretty interesting. As Gigi is mostly just like a catch and shoot guy, there are some off the dribble flashes, but I think the majority of his shots are catch and shoots, and what he does well with his kind of like slower segmented release are these kind of open catch and shoots where he's able to take advantage of that size. And I want to go back to the stats, what we were looking at. Again, I talk about how important volume is. 8 threes per 100 is pretty solid for a 6'9" freshman. I think if we go to this same filter, I'm just going to do this on the spot and look at like around like 7.8 where he is. Threes per 100. I mean, especially if we sort by height, and if we min out like at around like 6'7" or something, or even like 6'9". I'll do 6'8". Like you have a lot of really impressive shot makers, even ones who are rough as freshmen in a lot of moments, like Zaire Williams, or Cam Reddish, or Lauri Markkanen, or even Harrison Barnes, who were not very good as freshmen. So I think the shooting in combination with some of the big men skills and potential perimeter threat is really where I see Gigi's potential lying, rather than as like a creator bet, which is probably why he's getting a lot of the top 5 stuff that I don't really buy. Defensively, there's like a lot of freshman stuff, but there is interesting stuff. I think his like footwork and screen navigation was kind of surprising, where he has some moments of fluidity getting around these screens and using his good feet to change direction and to stick with defenders, and to make these off-ball plays hard. They have him, similar to offense, playing a pretty difficult defensive role. And there are moments where he's able to stick again. This is probably a foul, but he's going to be able to go through a lot of these guys with his size and his strength, stick with off-ball players, and end up shutting down those actions as well. I like the dig here as well at the end of the play, making this drive just a little bit tougher. With that, there's going to just be like freshman stuff as well, where I think the feel stuff and awareness you see on offense is true on defense, where he's kind of just like standing here. He's not really a threat to defend the corner. He's not really a threat to defend, this interior pass. And he ends up getting a lucky deflection there, I think, but isn't actually able to, make a real play there, I think. But you see other plays like this where he's just kind of running around and running into guys, where this is like very common for freshmen, especially ones his age. So I think like it's kind of hard to project him defensively. Aside from that, I'm like confident he's not going to be elite, or that amazing. But I think with his general frame and some of the footwork stuff he's flashed, he could be a solid defender. So I think Gigi Jackson, I'm excited to see him play against better and better competition, because even Georgetown's not a very good team. Like how he handles like this primary creation role against Kentucky and Tennessee and all of those great SEC teams is going to be really valuable information. Because right now, I'm not really buying him as a creator prospect, which to me means that he's someone who I would value in like, the mid-teens kind of area rather than top 5 or 10. I think there's some interesting complementary scoring big upside with him at this point. And I'm excited to see what he continues to do as the season progresses.